So, what inspired you to become a leader, or take a leadership role? Um, or
Well, I think it's a natural career progression that you want to take more responsibilities and keep sharpening my skill set and progressing my career. That's just very career orientated.
Mhm.
Um, is kind of what it's kind of I'd say um, it kind of fell into it, honestly.
Yeah,
And that's the background.
yeah. So, what was your first role in leadership?
Well, it was at Ernst and Young, and what happened at Ernst and Young is every year took a step forward in your career. So within 2 years, you had a team that you managed. You had a team of staff people that you managed. So you were
Mhm.
forced to supervise employees, give them tasks, and so that was the learning. And then you have to give them performance reviews and people development at Ernst and Young is a very important thing because everyone's about developing their careers. So as long as you were at Ernst and Young, you always had more direct reports as you progress.
Okay, that's
And they had a
interesting.
very strong people development framework. So it was all about people development. So in that sense, as long as I was at Ernst and Young, I was forced into it. But to be successful, you had to be an effective. You had to learn people development skills, people
Okay,
leadership.
yeah, that's pretty interesting. Yeah, I've only worked with that's an auditing company, correct? Yeah,
Yes, yeah,
yeah.
auditing and tax, but I did mostly audits.
All right. Um, luckily I've avoided working with it that much, but um, can you describe your leadership style, or, or if you have one?
Yeah, no. For me, it's giving people space to do great work. I'm a strong believer in empowering people to and giving them a free rein because I think that's when the best work gets done. And I try to be uh, I try to listen. I try to be supportive, and I really try not to micromanage. But sometimes it happens
Yep.
in certain situations. But I would say, democratic leadership style and approachable and coaching. But some of the characteristics, it's always adapted to the situation.
Hmm.
But my biggest thing is trying to make sure people feel like they have an impact on their role and that they're developing their careers. So I always keep that in mind when I'm working with people when they after they've worked with me for a period of time and they move to the next stage of their career, they can say, "No, I learned a lot under Craig because he helped. I learned new skills."
Okay.
And I feel like that gives people the most reward in their careers.
So does that change from person to person, or like situation to situation, like remote versus in person, or people with different personalities, or like do you adapt, or is it sort of the same to everybody?
Yeah, it's a great point. I have to adapt. I have to adapt a lot. I think my experience when I started at Ernst& Young is they call it a pace setter style. So I was working best with people with equal amount of ambition and smarts. And then I realized I was running into roadblocks when people didn't share my same level of uh, commitment and rigor. And so I really have to adapt my leadership style to the person. And if you notice that how I engage at Barnard, I have to be a lot more patient and with say patient, but more slow down with most folks
Hmm.
team.
Yeah.
And I say that to mostly an accounting team where it's just more supportive and just slow down and listen and really remove any kind of say it's not critical, but it's just me the strive for excellence. The less experienced folks don't always share that same strive for excellence. So I have to watch myself. So it is adaptive, um, and sometimes I have to micromanage not in a negative way, but just to show folks how things are done and sometimes that's harder because it takes more patience. So yeah, but I definitely have to adapt, but I have to watch myself because sometimes I'll I'll forget. I'll not forget, but I have a tendency just to strive for a higher level of performance, and that can get me in trouble.
Yeah, that's not that there's a right answer, but that's the first chapter in our book was on there's no one side. You can't just use the same strategy for everybody.
Yeah.
Like I think the term was don't use a hammer unless the job involves nails, and there's lots of tool analogies in there. But yeah, that's how it. So good. Let's see. Have you ever, well, I assume you have, had to make an unpopular decision, and how do you tend to handle those kinds of situations?
Most times I'm deeply thoughtful, and so I might take longer to make the decision. I'd say unpopular decision. I'm trying to think of an example. Unpopular. I've had to terminate people, and I think the knock on me probably is I'll give folks a lot of leeway and every chance to succeed, but then when the decision's made, it's pretty cold cut. But we had a controller working for us, and I had the team realized that if I didn't do something, it was maybe a 6 month. It wasn't working, but I think after the second month, folks had figured out that it wasn't working. But I gave them every single chance for 6 months. And the good part about that is they saw that I cared about people and I cared about development. I tried to give someone every chance. But I'd say it was a popular decision. I would say the fact that I hung on to the person for longer was probably unpopular.
Yeah.
But I felt like that was the right thing to do, just keeping the human side in mind.
Yeah, it's always tough. I mean, I haven't had to do with that, but I can imagine how tough it could be.
Yeah, and I think the balance for me is I've had to do this a few times, and you get better at it. But the thing is that the inaction on making a move like that can really harm the team dynamic.
Yeah.
And something I learned from Joe is his philosophy in a way is get people on the right people on the bus earlier. The earlier you can do it, the better. And that's quite hard to do that, and because you have to balance the people development aspect and give them every chance to succeed. So it's a fine balance.
All right, cool. How do you, or along the same lines, how do you handle like conflicts within a team or between teams or business units?
Yeah, no, I feel like that's mostly what I do nowadays is conflict, and there's a lot of political. I say political savvy. But I'm going through a few things now. I'll just give you an example. But like with HR, they want to do something, and I don't agree. And what I've decided to do is, there's a Stephen Covey. He's an old author, but it's seek to understand and then be understood.
Yeah.
And so it never works to lay a power card unless there's a straight compliance issue. Or stick, but it always works to listen first, mirror and validate the person's perspective. It's the only way that I've ever seen a conflict get resolved. It never works when I start talking about my position. And so as a result, sometimes conflict can take longer. But I've learned to make it personal. It never works, no matter how frustrated I might be. So I really try to take the time to reflect, to journal first, and then try to get the other person talking openly, freely, and give them safety. I think giving people safety on how they feel is it's the only way that they're going to kind of move on their position.
Yeah.
And it takes a lot of discipline. It's taken many years to get there, and patience. But that I think is what I can do well.
Yeah.
And I think recognizing that you lose a lot You can't win your way. You can't win. In business, there's a lot of times you have to have a compromise, or you don't get your way. And it's a matter of picking and choosing where you want to enforce your will.
Yeah.
And it's rare, really you want to be collaborative. So collaboration, listening, safety, those are all tools in the skill set that I've really tried to draw on, because that's the only time I've ever seen any conflict get resolved productively.
That makes a lot of sense. Yeah, we've discussed something that I read or learned in this class so far is that, like, being a manager at a certain position, like, you can't just be a manager because you're really good at the job that person manages. Like, you can't be a salesman. Like, just because you're a really good salesman doesn't mean you'll be a good sales manager. And a lot of leadership is less the the field, being in and excelling in that field, and more so managing people and conflicts. So that's part of when we discussed when I was discussing what concentration I was going to pursue. Sort of why I leaned more towards the leadership path of it. I haven't applied for it yet, but that's what I'm going to end up doing. So yeah, that was a good answer. I appreciate it.
Good.
Let's see. And then how do you respond to the feedback, whether it be positive or negative or neutral?
Look, I try to I go back again to repeating back what I've heard and make sure the person feels heard, that I've received the feedback. I have to watch my nonverbals. I am sort of by nature introverted, so I try to be open faced and say, okay, I understand how you feel, and I thank you for the feedback. I try to give the person room to let them know that I've heard them first, always first. And sometimes I have to be careful. Sometimes I internalize things, so because I'm always want to be amicable and amiable, maybe. So sometimes I might respond if it's really harsh. I might internalize, and one of my blind spots, or one of the areas I'm working on, is sometimes I'm afraid of my own frustration, my own anger. So what I've learned to do is respond much quicker, and I say respond quicker but slowly. So to get it out, because the danger is if the criticism is really harsh, then I internalize it, and then it comes out in strange ways.
Yeah.
So it's really important for me to say, kind of get, at least throw feedback, say I'm struggling with the feedback. Can I get back to you? That piece, so it comes out of my system. So I've learned how to be much more vocal about feedback that's harsh, just to let the person, validate the feedback first instead of fight it. But don't internalize it either. So it's like it's two-sided coin. So I'm continuously learning that. Even later in my career, I'm still developing that skill set.
That's interesting. Yeah, we actually watched a TED talk on introversion and leadership, and how extroverts are somewhat more drawn to leadership, but introverts can make better leaders because they don't really want to be the leader. They just want to do it for they think that's what's right. But yeah, so that's our time. So I appreciate it.